The mansion was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Austine Coleman had returned home unannounced, hoping to surprise his wife after a long business trip. But what he found in the kitchen stopped him cold. There stood Sandra, his beautiful new bride, arguing with his mother, the woman who had given him everything. And before he could even step forward, Sandra raised a glass of cold water and poured it right over his mother's face. The glass slipped from her hand. The sound echoed. His mother gasped, and the truth that Austine had been blind to finally opened its eyes. But how did it come to this? How did love turn to pride and pride to cruelty? Let's go back to where this story really began. The sun had barely risen over the city of Seattle when Austine Coleman stepped out of his private jet. The morning air was cool and crisp, brushing softly against his face as he took a deep breath. For most people, flying home in a jet was a dream. But for Austine, it wasn't the luxury that mattered. It was what waited at home. After 3 long weeks away on a business trip, he was finally returning. The deal had closed earlier than expected, and for once, he had a few days to himself. He decided not to tell anyone he was coming back early, not even Sandra, his wife of 2 years. Austine loved surprises, especially the kind that brought smiles. He imagined the joy on Sandra's face when she opened the door and found him standing there, flowers in hand, just like he did the first time he asked her out. As his driver loaded his luggage into the sleek black SUV, Austine's thoughts drifted to his mother, Margaret Coleman. She was in her late 60s now, graceful, soft-spoken, and the heart of his world. She had built him up from nothing, taught him to work hard, stay humble, and never forget where he came from. Though she lived across town, she often visited for a few days whenever he traveled, saying she liked to keep an eye on things for her son. He smiled at the thought. "I hope Mom's there today," he mused. "It'll be nice to surprise them both." Inside the Coleman mansion, the atmosphere was less cheerful. Sandra stood in front of the mirror in her walk-in closet, staring at her reflection with mild irritation. She was stunning, every curl of her dark hair perfectly in place, her dress elegant and expensive, but her face carried a shadow of impatience. 3 weeks, she muttered under her breath. 3 whole weeks of babysitting his mother. Margaret had come over 2 days after Austine's departure, saying she missed her daughter-in-law and wanted to spend time together. At first, Sandra had smiled politely and agreed, but by the 3rd week, she was tired. Tired of Margaret's quiet advice, her constant tidying up, her gentle reminders about family values. Sandra wanted space. She wanted freedom. She wanted her husband back, not his mother in her guest room. Just then, Margaret's voice called from downstairs. "Sandra, dear, I made breakfast. You should eat something before your coffee gets cold." Sandra rolled her eyes. "Coffee gets cold because people keep interrupting me," she muttered. She plastered on a polite smile and walked downstairs. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen. Margaret was setting the table, humming softly to herself. "Good morning, sweetheart. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." Sandra forced a smile. "You didn't have to, Margaret. I'm not really hungry." "Oh, but you need to eat," Margaret replied kindly. "You've been skipping meals. You're too thin for your own good." Sandra's jaw tightened. Too thin. The older woman's comment hit her pride. "I'll eat later," she said curtly, picking up her phone and scrolling through her notifications. Margaret sighed softly, but said nothing more. She had learned over the years that patience was sometimes louder than words. Meanwhile, Austine's car rolled through the familiar neighborhood. His heart swelled as he approached the long driveway. The house looked peaceful from the outside, exactly how he liked it. He had no idea that inside those walls, peace was the last thing alive. "Sir," the driver said, slowing near the gate, "should I announce your arrival?"
Austine smiled. "No, thank you, Ryan. Let's make this a surprise." As the gate opened silently and the car glided toward the mansion, Austine looked up at the glass windows of his home. He imagined Sandra inside, laughing with his mother, maybe even cooking together. It filled him with pride, his two favorite women, side by side. He had no way of knowing that in just a few minutes, that image would shatter. For now, he was just a man returning home, hopeful, loving, and unaware that fate was already writing the first painful line of a story he would never forget.
The morning sun poured through the large windows of the Coleman mansion, spreading golden light across the marble floor. It was a beautiful house, every inch a picture of wealth and taste. Yet inside, the air felt heavy. Sandra Coleman sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Her face glowed under the soft light of the screen as she flipped through comments on her latest social media post. It was a video she'd uploaded the night before, a smiling selfie with Margaret in the background, both holding cups of tea. The caption read, "Family time with my wonderful mother-in-law. #grateful, #love wins, #family first." The comments were full of admiration. "You're such a sweet daughter-in-law. Beautiful souls. Goals." Sandra smirked. "If only they knew," she murmured, tossing the phone aside. Behind the perfect pictures and sweet captions, things were very different. Margaret was in the guest room, folding laundry that didn't even belong to her. She always found ways to keep busy, and Sandra hated it. The old woman never complained, never raised her voice. She just did things quietly, as if the house still belonged to her. Sandra poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen island. She'd barely taken a sip when she heard Margaret's voice. "Good morning, dear. I washed your towels and ironed your blouses. They were still damp from the dryer." Sandra set her cup down with a thud. "Margaret, you really don't have to do that. We have staff for a reason." Margaret smiled gently. "I know, but I enjoy helping out. Keeps me moving." Sandra sighed. "It's fine, but please just relax a little. You're a guest." "I will," Margaret said kindly, though her eyes carried something softer, concern, perhaps. "I just don't want you to tire yourself out. You've been working so hard lately." Sandra forced a laugh. "Oh, don't worry. I'm doing just fine." But the truth was, she wasn't fine. She was bored. Austine's absence had left her restless. There were no fancy events, no photo shoots, no luxury dinners, just the long, quiet days of pretending to be the ideal wife. By noon, she decided to step out. She dressed sharply, jeans, a designer jacket, sunglasses, and grabbed her car keys. Margaret followed her to the door. "Where are you off to, dear?" she asked, gently. "Just meeting a friend for lunch," Sandra replied, avoiding eye contact. "I'll be back later." "All right," Margaret said softly. "Drive safely." As soon as Sandra left, the house felt peaceful again. Margaret sat by the window, knitting a scarf. She thought of her son, Austine, the little boy who used to promise he'd buy her a big house someday. He had kept that promise, and more. He loved him deeply, and she wanted to love Sandra too, but something in the young woman's eyes always felt distant. When Sandra returned later that afternoon, she looked exhausted. She dropped her purse on the couch and kicked off her shoes. Margaret greeted her warmly. "How was lunch?" "It was fine," Sandra said flatly. Margaret hesitated, then said quietly, "You seem tired, dear. Maybe I should make you some tea." Sandra snapped. "No, Margaret, I don't need tea. I need space." The old woman blinked, startled. "I'm sorry, Sandra, I didn't mean—" "Please," Sandra interrupted, her tone sharp. "I've talked about this. You've been here for days, and I appreciate it, but I think you've done enough. I just want to relax in my own house without someone hovering." The words hung in the air, cold and cutting. Margaret's shoulders drooped slightly. She gave a small nod. "I understand. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Sandra turned away, guilt flickering in her chest, but she pushed it down. "It's fine. Just give me a little quiet, please." Margaret walked slowly toward her room. As she closed the door, a tear slid down her cheek. She whispered a prayer for patience, for her son, and for the woman he loved. Upstairs, Sandra sank into the couch. For a moment, silence filled the house again, but instead of peace, she felt an odd emptiness creeping in. She told herself she was right. Margaret needed to learn boundaries. Still, something about the sadness in the old woman's eyes wouldn't leave her mind. Outside, the sky began to dim. The quiet house sat under the soft glow of evening, calm on the outside, but uneasy within. Neither of them knew that at that very moment, Austine Coleman's car was already crossing into the city limits, his heart light, his plan simple: to surprise his wife and hug his mother. He had no idea that what awaited him at home would break that heart in ways money could never fix.
The city of Seattle glowed under the afternoon sun as Austine Coleman's car cruised along the familiar streets. He leaned back in his seat, his lips curving into a soft smile as he looked out the tinted window. It felt good to be home. After weeks of board meetings, late-night negotiations, and polite smiles at investors' dinners, he was finally back where his heart belonged. "Let's not go straight home," he told his driver, Ryan. "Stop by the florist first." "Yes, sir," Ryan replied, turning the wheel smoothly. Austine checked his watch. It was just past 3 p.m., a perfect time. Sandra would probably be relaxing, maybe reading or watching TV. His mother, if she was still visiting, would no doubt be in the kitchen, humming as she cooked. The thought made him smile wider. He missed those sounds: the warmth of home, the smell of pancakes, the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Those were the things that kept him grounded, even as billions moved under his signature. At the florist, he picked out a bouquet of fresh white lilies, Sandra's favorite. He added a smaller bunch of pink carnations for his mother. "She deserves these," he said with a chuckle. "No woman loves flowers more than my mom." Ryan loaded the flowers into the car as Austine made a quick call to his personal chef. "No dinner tonight," he said cheerfully. "I'll handle that myself. We're celebrating." He wanted the night to be special. Maybe he'd cook for them, something light and homely. They'd sit together, talk about everything he'd missed, and laugh like old times. Yes, that was the plan. A quiet, happy reunion. But fate had written a different script. At the Coleman mansion, things weren't so bright. Margaret stood at the kitchen sink, washing a few dishes. She moved slowly, humming an old gospel tune, her hands steady but her heart heavy. The tension between her and Sandra hadn't lifted since the morning. She spent the afternoon mostly in her room, coming out only to tidy up. Margaret never liked conflict, and she certainly didn't want to burden her son with stories of friction at home. Maybe she's just stressed, she told herself. She'll come around. Meanwhile, Sandra sat in the living room, scrolling on her phone again. She looked bored, annoyed, and restless. Every sound from the kitchen grated on her nerves. The running water, the soft clinking of plates, the gentle humming. It was as if the older woman's very presence was a reminder that she wasn't truly in control of this house. She put her phone down with a groan. "Does she ever stop moving?" she muttered. Margaret heard her and turned. "Sorry, dear. I'll be done in a minute." "It's fine," Sandra said flatly. "You've been cleaning since morning. Why not take a break?" "I just want to make sure everything's nice before Austine returns," Margaret replied kindly. Sandra stiffened. "Before he returns? You think he's coming back tonight?" Margaret smiled softly. "Maybe not tonight, but soon. My heart tells me he'll surprise us." Sandra forced a laugh.
Well, your heart's wrong. He said he'd be away another week. Margaret didn't argue. She simply smiled again and went back to rinsing the dishes. Outside, Austine's car was turning into their quiet neighborhood. His heart beat a little faster as he saw the familiar white pillars of the mansion come into view. He felt like a young man again, about to meet the love of his life for the first time. "Ryan," he said, "don't pull into the driveway yet. Stop by the gate. I'll walk in myself." "Understood, sir." Ryan nodded. Austine gathered the flowers and stepped out quietly. The autumn breeze brushed his face as he approached the front door, his shoes making no sound on the smooth path. He wanted this moment to be perfect, to see the joy on their faces when they realized he was home early. He reached the door, turned the handle slowly, and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No music, no laughter, not even a hello. Just the faint sound of clinking dishes from the kitchen. He frowned slightly, but smiled again. They probably don't even know I'm here yet. He walked deeper into the house, moving quietly, listening. Then he heard voices. Margaret's soft, gentle tone, and Sandra's sharp reply. He paused, his heartbeat slowing. He stepped closer, his hand tightening around the bouquet. "Margaret, please just stop acting like this is your house," Sandra said, her voice low but filled with irritation. "You've rearranged the kitchen, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, and made comments about how I live. I'm not your little girl, and I don't need your advice." "I didn't mean to upset you," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "I was only trying to help." "Well, stop helping," Sandra snapped. "You're not helping, you're hovering. This is my home, and I'd like to feel like it belongs to me again." There was a heavy pause. Austine's breath caught. He stepped closer, his hand tightening around the bouquet. Margaret spoke again, softer this time. "Sandra, dear, I'm sorry. I'll go back to my room." "No," Sandra interrupted coldly. "Go to your house. You've done enough here." Austine froze. His heart sank like a stone. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, his wife speaking to his mother like a stranger. From the hallway, he watched as Margaret bowed her head slightly, hurt in her eyes, and began to walk toward the stairs. Sandra stood still, arms crossed, lips pressed tight in silent frustration. The flowers in Austine's hands trembled. He wanted to step forward to say something, but he didn't. Not yet. He needed to see who Sandra really was. And deep down, he knew. Something even worse was coming.
The air inside the mansion had grown tense, thick enough to cut through. Austine Coleman stood hidden at the edge of the hallway, half shielded by the wall near the kitchen door. The flowers he held, white lilies and pink carnations, were now trembling in his grip. His heart pounded as if every beat echoed through the quiet house. He could hear his mother's soft voice again, low and wounded. "Sandra, dear, I didn't mean to interfere. You're right. This is your home. I'll just rest for a while." There was a pause. Then Sandra's voice, sharper this time, sliced through the air. "Oh, please, Margaret, don't play the victim. You walk around here acting like you own everything. You even tell the maids what to do. You've been here for almost 3 weeks. Don't you think that's enough?" Austine's jaw tightened. 3 weeks? He hadn't realized his mother had stayed that long. But what pained him wasn't the words. It was the tone, the arrogance in Sandra's voice. Margaret's reply came, soft and calm. "I only wanted to make your days easier, Sandra. I know how busy you are. I just wanted to help." "Help? By criticizing me? By rearranging my kitchen like I don't know how to keep a house?" "I never criticized you, dear. I admire how you run your home." "Then stop acting like you're the queen here," Sandra snapped, her temper breaking. The room fell silent. Margaret stood frozen, hands trembling slightly. She had raised her son with patience and grace, and she had tried to extend that same grace to his wife. But Sandra's words pierced deep. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she whispered. "Sorry?" Sandra scoffed. "Don't be sorry. Just go. You've been here long enough." Margaret took a slow breath, fighting back tears. "It's late, Sandra. I'll leave in the morning." That answer didn't seem to please Sandra. She rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath, "I can't even enjoy my own house without feeling watched." She turned away, reached for a glass of water from the counter, and took a sip. But as Margaret started to walk past her toward the stairs, the old woman's hand accidentally brushed against Sandra's arm. A drop of water spilled on Sandra's dress. Sandra froze. "Look what you've done," she barked. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. It was an accident." "Accident? You just can't stop getting in my way," she shouted, slamming the glass down on the counter. The rest of the water splashed slightly onto the floor. Then, in a moment of rage, an ugly, impulsive moment, Sandra picked up the glass again, half filled now with cold water from the dispenser. Margaret looked up, confused. "Sandra, what are you—" Before she could finish, her hand jerked forward. The cold water splashed straight across Margaret's face. The old woman gasped, frozen in shock as the icy drops trickled down her cheeks. The glass clattered against the counter, echoing through the kitchen. For a few seconds, no one moved. Sandra stood there breathing hard, her face twisted with anger, but underneath it, a flicker of guilt flashed across her eyes. She hadn't meant to go that far. And then she heard it. A voice, deep, controlled, and shaking with fury. "Sandra." She turned. Standing in the doorway was Austine Coleman. The flowers were still in his hand, the petals now crushed between his fingers. His eyes burned, not with surprise, but with a quiet, devastating disappointment. Austine," she stammered, her voice trembling. "You're home? I didn't know." He stepped forward slowly, his face pale with disbelief. His gaze shifted from Sandra to his mother, who stood still, soaked and speechless, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to wipe her face. "What did you just do?" he asked softly, his voice dangerously calm. It's not what it looks like. She was being impossible, and I just—" "Don't!" he cut her off sharply. "Don't lie." Her lips parted, but no words came. Austine dropped the flowers on the counter. The white lilies fell apart, petals scattering across the floor like quiet witnesses to what had just happened. He stepped closer to his mother, his voice gentler now. "Mom, are you okay?" Margaret nodded weakly, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, son. Just surprised to see you." Her calmness only deepened his anger. He turned back to Sandra, his eyes cold. "You poured water on my mother, in my house?" Sandra's hands shook. "It wasn't like that." "Stop!" His voice rose just slightly. "There's no excuse for what I saw." The silence stretched. The sound of the clock ticking in the background filled the room. Sandra's tears began to fall. "Austine, please, you don't understand." "I understand enough," he said firmly. "You left me here with the woman who raised me, who would give her life for me, and this is how you treat her." He took a slow breath, his expression hardening. "Get your things. When I return, I don't want to find you here." Sandra froze, staring at him in disbelief. "Austine, please!" But he was already walking away, his heart breaking with every step. The lilies lay crushed on the kitchen floor, beside the empty glass of cold water, the final proof of a love turned sour and a respect destroyed.
The Coleman mansion felt colder that evening. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature, but everything to do with broken trust. Austine Coleman sat alone in his study, the lights dimmed, his thoughts scattered like shattered glass. The scent of crushed lilies still lingered faintly in his hands. He hadn't spoken a word since what happened in the kitchen. He had only helped his mother to her room, waited until she was calm, then retreated here, to the silence. The events kept replaying in his mind. The shock in his mother's eyes, the defensiveness in Sandra's voice, the sound of that glass hitting the counter. Every moment was carved into his memory now. He stared out the large window that overlooked the dark city skyline. Somewhere out there, thousands of lights glittered across Seattle's night sky. People laughing, dining, living freely. But in this house, peace had died. A soft knock came at the door. "Austine?" His mother's gentle voice called. "May I come in?" He turned. "Of course, Mom." Margaret walked slowly in, wearing a light shawl. Her face was tired, but her eyes were kind. "You've been sitting here for hours, son. Come eat something." He shook his head. "I'm not hungry." She gave a sad smile. "You've always been like this. Whenever your heart hurts, you stop eating." He sighed, looking down. "I can't understand it, Mom. How could she treat you that way? What did you ever do to deserve that?" Margaret sat beside him. "People's hearts are not always what they appear to be. Maybe Sandra let pride take over. Maybe she thought she was protecting her space. Either way, it's not your fault." Austine looked at her, his voice low. "You always defend everyone, even those who hurt you." Margaret smiled faintly. "Because anger doesn't heal, son. Only truth does. But the truth must be seen, not shouted." He nodded slowly. "You're right. The truth will speak for itself." The next morning, Sandra sat in the bedroom, red-eyed from crying all night. Her suitcase lay half open on the floor. She hadn't packed yet. Deep down, she believed Austine might calm down, come upstairs and forgive her. He loved her too much to let her go, she thought. When she finally came downstairs, Margaret was at the dining table with a cup of tea. Sandra hesitated, shame washing over her. "Margaret," she began softly, "about last night." The older woman looked up gently. "Good morning, dear." Sandra swallowed. "I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I didn't mean to throw the water. I just got angry." Margaret nodded slowly. "Anger reveals what patience hides, Sandra. Perhaps last night showed us who we both really are." Sandra blinked, her eyes filling again. "Please, don't tell Austine's friends or anyone else. I can't bear the humiliation." Margaret's eyes softened, but she said nothing. She simply stood and left the room. Sandra exhaled, relieved. Maybe things could still be repaired. But that hope shattered a few hours later. At noon, Austine gathered everyone in the living room, his mother, Sandra, and 2 longtime family staff members. His expression was calm, but his silence carried weight. He began slowly, "I've believed that respect is the foundation of love." Sandra looked up nervously. "Austine, please!" He raised a hand, stopping her. "I don't want excuses. I just want clarity." He turned to one of the staff, Janet, the head housekeeper. "Janet, when I'm away, this house has cameras for security purposes. You know that, right?" Janet nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Austine pressed a button on the small remote in his hand. The large TV screen in the living room flickered to life. Sandra's eyes widened in horror as the footage began to play. There it was, last night's recording. The kitchen, the argument, her words, her actions, the glass of cold water splashing across Margaret's face. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the video playback. Sandra covered her mouth in shock, her body trembling. "Austine, I didn't know there was a camera there. I mean, it wasn't what it looks like." "It looks exactly what it was." Margaret turned her face away, tears in her eyes. Sandra dropped to her knees. "Please, Austine, I'm sorry. I lost control. I love you. I swear I do. Don't do this to me." He looked down at her, his voice steady but heavy with disappointment. "You did this to yourself, Sandra. You poured water on my mother and thought no one would know. But the truth always finds its way out." Sandra sobbed, gripping his hand, but he gently pulled away. "I built this life on trust, on love, on respect. And now I see I married an image, not a heart." He turned to Janet. "Pack her things. She'll leave by evening." Sandra's cries grew louder, but Austine didn't waver. Margaret stood still, tears streaming silently down her face. When Sandra finally left the house that evening, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. She paused at the gate, looking back one last time. For the first time in her life, the mansion looked small, smaller than her pride, smaller than her loss. The headlines would come soon after. "Billionaire's wife exposed in family incident." The story spread like wildfire, twisting and turning through social media. People judged, speculated, mocked. But none of it hurt Sandra as much as the silence that came from the one man she loved, the man she had lost forever. Inside, Austine stood beside his mother by the fireplace. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked softly. Margaret nodded, smiling faintly. "I will be. The truth hurts, but it heals." Austine looked into the fire, his heart heavy. "Maybe, but right now it just burns."
A week had passed since the storm inside the Coleman mansion. The city moved on, as it always did, but inside Austine's heart, Tom felt slow. The headlines had begun to fade, the gossip had quieted, but the wound within his home still ached. The once busy house was quieter now. No soft laughter from Sandra, no echo of her heels against the marble floor. Just silence, broken occasionally by the soft clinking of Margaret's teacup, or the gentle turning of pages from a book. In that silence, healing had begun, slow, careful, and honest. Margaret Coleman sat by the window that overlooked the garden, a warm shawl over her shoulders. The morning light rested gently on her face. She looked peaceful, though her eyes still carried the memory of what had happened. Austine walked in quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You're up early again," he said softly. Margaret smiled. "Mothers don't really sleep much, son. We just rest between worries." He handed her a cup and sat beside her. "You shouldn't have to worry anymore. Everything's being handled. The lawyers, the press, no one's going to bother you." She nodded. "It's not me I worry about. It's you." Austine looked down at his cup. "I'll be fine, Mom. I've been through business battles worse than this." Margaret chuckled lightly. "Business is simple, son. You count your gains and losses. But the heart, that's where the hardest math lives." He smiled faintly. "You always know how to put things into words." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the light filter through the trees. Then Margaret said softly, "You did the right thing, Austine. Painful as it was, truth needed to come out. Sometimes love has to break before wisdom grows." Austine's jaw tightened slightly. "I just keep thinking about what I missed, Mom. How did I not see who she really was?" Margaret reached out and touched his hand. "Because you loved her. Love is meant to see the best in people. That's not weakness, it's faith.
But when faith meets truth, you learn what love really costs." He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. Across town, Sandra Coleman sat in a small apartment, her designer clothes folded in boxes she hadn't opened. The luxury she once flaunted was gone, her social media accounts deactivated, her circle of friends silent. She stared out the window at the gray Seattle sky. The world outside moved on, but inside her, guilt lingered like a shadow. She replayed that night over and over. The glass, the cold water, the look in Margaret's eyes, the silence in Austine's. Every time, her heart broke a little more. Her phone vibrated. A message from an old friend read, "You'll bounce back, girl. Just marry better next time." She stared at the words for a long time before deleting the message. For the first time, she didn't want to bounce back. She wanted to change. She picked up her journal, the one she'd barely written in since her wedding. Slowly, she began to write. Respect is not earned by wealth or beauty. It's earned by how we treat people when no one is watching. She paused, tears spilling silently onto the page. I thought I had everything, but I forgot the one thing that truly matters: character. Back at the mansion, the garden had begun to bloom again. Margaret sat outside, knitting, while Austine spoke quietly with one of his staff members about a new charitable foundation, one focused on helping elderly parents who lived alone. "Let's call it the Margaret Fund," he said with a smile. Margaret looked up from her knitting, surprised. "Oh, Austine, you don't have to name it after me." He smiled warmly. "I do, Mom, because you're the reason I know what real love looks like." She reached for his hand, her voice soft but steady. "And you, son, are the reason I know that good men still exist." For the first time in weeks, they both laughed, softly, peacefully. The past couldn't be erased, but it had taught them something no money could buy: that the measure of a person is not in what they have, but in how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return.
In the end, truth walked right into the Coleman mansion, and it refused to leave quietly. Austine lost the woman he thought he loved, but found something far greater: clarity. Sandra learned too that beauty may open doors, but character is what keeps them from closing. Respect, love, and humility, these are the real riches no bank can hold. Remember, friends, how you treat others when no one is watching says more about you than anything money can buy. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life lessons that speak to the soul.